Today we are going to discuss the emergence of Neolithic culture in the Indian subcontinent beyond the Harappan cultural zone. I have with me my colleagues from the Ancient Indian History and Culture Department of Calcutta University, Dr. Rita Chaudhary, who is now the head of the department, and Prita Bhattacharya from the same department. Neolithic is actually the last phase of Stone Age, and this is denoted by an advanced use of finer and better stone tools which are smaller in size, more efficient and manufactured for multiple purpose. But along with this, a great signifier of the Neolithic is considered to be man's shift from hunting gathering stage to food production. Now this also initiates certain paradigm shift in the relationship between animal, man and land.
Does it also mean sedentary living?
Yes, of course it means sedentary living, because along with farming what is happening is that man's attachment with land and man's attachment with the herd animals was growing. So they had to select a certain area within which they were carrying out these activities. We have certain clusters of Neolithic in geographical areas. One of the chronologically earliest Neolithic clusters were found located in the Bolan Valley, which is in the southern Ganga plains. The next zone would be the Kashmir region, Kashmir Neolithic. The third region would be the middle Ganga plains, where we have the Bihar sites. Then we have the eastern Indian sites from West Bengal, Orissa and Assam. And then finally we have the southern Neolithic cultures from mostly from Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, and also a little bit from Tamil Nadu. In Bolan Valley what we find is that there are clusters of Neolithic sites in the river valley, small river valleys, which are the Bolan, Son, Lapari, Paisuni and Rihand, and one of the type site is Chopani Mando. Now Chopani Mando is very interesting because we have a Mesolithic layer also there, and then which is overlaid with the Neolithic layer, which gives a clear indication that there was a transformation from the Mesolithic stage to the Neolithic stage. And date wise, the massa corrected datings, radiocarbon datings we get from Koldiwa, which is very interesting because the earliest dating is 8000 BC, 6000 BC time bracket. And Koldiwa is also very important because this is a particular site where we get not only signatures of habitations like dwelling units, wattle and daub huts, but also the use of first wild rice and then domesticated rice.
Is there any significance of Neolithic finds from Mohagara?
Mohagara is a site in the Bolan Valley, and a most striking discovery is a demarcated area, you know, and they have identified it as a cattle pen. And they found marks of post holes around that area, and about 40 to 60 animals could be enclosed, and they identified it by the hoof marks of cattle.
Can we have a little bit more about the material culture at the Bolan Valley sites?
Pottery was mostly handmade, and we can identify three types of potteries. One is the cord marked ware, the other one is the black and red ware, and there's a plain red ware.
The majority of the shapes that have been unearthed include large storage jars and deep bowls.
In Kashmir, most of the Neolithic sites that have been discovered are located in a diagonal line from northwest to southeast between the districts of Baramulla, then Srinagar, then Anantnag. And the most important sites are Burza Home, Gufkral, Olchi Bagh, Hariparigam, Wadzal, and these are actually situated on a geological formation which is locally known as Karewa. the geologists inform us that most of the valley of Kashmir was actually a lake in the Pleistocene times, and later on the lake got dried up, and due to the movement of the Pir Panjal and the Kashmir ranges, the surface of the lake was also elevated, raised, and some sort of tableland or terrace had been formed. Now the conglomerate which forms this particular kind of tableland is composed of alluvial depositions or fluviatile depositions. They are composed of sand and clay, which is very fertile for cultivation. And in the present times, most of the cultivation that takes place in Kashmir actually occurs on this kind of depositions. And it is very interesting to note that the prehistoric settlements were also located on this kind of terraces.
Kashmir Neolithic sites have yielded some peculiar characteristics in their dwelling patterns.
Yeah, at both Burzahom and Gufkral, the two most important excavated sites, we see that the actual people used to live in subterranean pits, holes dug into the ground below the surface. The earliest holes went below as far deep as 4 meters. Later on they became shallower. The later pits would be about 3 to 5 centimeters only in depth. Now the shape of these pits would be oval or circular mostly, and the walls of the pits were found to be plastered with mud. And not only that, they were actually narrower at the surface of the soil, and they got deeper and wider at the bottom. The top circumference would be about 3 meters, and at the bottom the circumference would be about 4.5 meters. Very interestingly, we have found also signs of steps leading down to the floor of the holes. In some cases we don't have any sign of steps, so it seems that they must have used some kind of ladder. At the ground level of the floor of the pits actually are marked with post holes.
Okay.
So it seems that wooden posts were planted in these holes, and the top would be supporting some kind of a thatched roof. The other interesting piece of evidence which has come from this the site of Burzahom, for example, is the remains of birch tree.
Okay.
Now the name Burzahom is very interesting. It is in Kashmiri, it means the place of burz or birch tree.
Birch.
So it seems that probably they used the woods of both birch and some kind of pine roof, kind of thatched roof with pine leaves, to prepare a shelter. But interestingly enough, in the period 2 levels later on, we find that these holes were filled up with clay, and the top was actually covered and plastered with mud with a coating of red ochre, which is also very interesting. Now in the period 1 level, not only were they living inside these pits, but their hearths were also formed as pits. And the shape of the hearths were different, not round or oval, but square or rectangular. And the hearths were located at the center of the settlement. Okay. It seems a community kitchen sort of thing. But can you enlighten us as to the burial practices?
Well, most of the burials were within the habitational area, right underneath the hut floors, and there were circular pits plastered with lime, and we have both secondary burial and inhumation. And what is very interesting is that we get animal burial along with human burial. Wild animals like wolves or deer, they were buried, and domesticated animals like cattle were also buried along with humans. And what is a very touching picture is the burial of a dog. You could almost visualize the tame, faithful dog following his master to his grave.
Would it kind of say something about their practicing hunting, and probably the dogs actually helped and accompanied the hunters from this site? What kind of evidence do we have from these sites about their pottery?
From period 1 at Burzahom, we have handmade pottery of a very coarse variety, and the colors range from grey, buff, red and brown. And another interesting feature is that on the surface of this pottery we find impressions of a mat. Maybe when they were being made, they were placed on a mat, so the impressions have come on the surface. Then in period 2 again the pottery is handmade, but now we have a new kind of ware, which is a polished burnished ware. And the types include, in the first period 1, rimless bowls and jars, and in period 2 we have high necked jars and bowls with flared lips. And at a later period in Gufkal we find again handmade pottery with a kind of grey ware, and again matte impressions on the surface. And there we have the usual forms like basins, bowls, jars and so on. And
so that comes at a later period, the
Yes,
second subphase.
Yeah, and the second subphase is actually dated to 1700 BC, whereas the beginnings of this culture at Burzahom is actually 2900 BC.
that is a ceramic period,
Yes.
where you do not find pottery at all.
At Gufkral,
that's
but at Burzahom for both the periods we have
find
pottery
pottery.
and handmade pottery.
Pottery.
The stone tools are very interesting. They have a wide array. We have special Neolithic oblong and oval axes and cells, and we also have chopping stones, grinding stones and mace heads. That's actually an indication for hunting. They have a very nice array of bone tools also, and we have harpoons, for example, which indicates fishing. Once more. Harpoons and bone points and other scrapers and other such things. So we have a lot of assemblage for the Neolithic in Kashmir Valley. Another very interesting evidence is in the form of plant remains. We get wheat, barley and lentil. Most of the Neolithic sites are found on the North Bihar plains. The most important sites are like Chirand, Senuar, Chechar Kutubpur, Maner, Taradi. All of them actually are located near the smaller streams ranging out from Saraju, Ganga and the other tributaries of the Ganges in this region. Chirand is located in district Saran. It is located at the confluence of Saraju and the Ganga river. And Senuar is in district Rohtak. Taradi is very interestingly located, it's near Bodh Gaya, and Maner is near Patna.
Evidence of pottery that we get from Chirand is mostly handmade. It is red, grey or black ware, and we also have evidence of a burnished grey ware. It is a bit more polished than the handmade ware. And over here, one interesting thing that I want to point out is that we get remnants of houses made of wattle and dove, and there are rammed floors and hearths also over there. And why I would like to mention this is that we find a semicircular hut with oblong ovens over there. So it probably was a kind of community kitchen for the people living in Chirand. Now next we have at Senuar, you have mentioned the site. It has two phases of Neolithic ages. In the first phase I don't know if we have any existence of any pottery, but in the second phase we have three kinds of pottery: the red ware, the burnished grey ware and the burnished red ware. Preeta, tell us something about the bead industry over there.
Yes, it's a fascinating collection of beads in different shapes, different forms, different colors, and mostly they're made from jasper, carnelian or marble. And it seems that Chirand was actually a bead manufacturing center, because you get unfinished beads from here.
Okay, that reminds me, they were even making microlithic blades out of some of the semi-precious stones like jasper, agate and quartz and other. And along with that, we also find some Neolithic kilts and axes, and we have hammer stones, and of course the agricultural tools like the quern and the pestle as a mortar. So all this consists of the stone tool assemblage there. Is there any botanical evidence from there?
Oh yes, it seems that rice was the main crop along with wheat, barley, and there are traces of lentil and millet also.
Okay. Do we have any evidence of animal bones?
Yes, there are wild animals like the nilgai or the rhinoceros, and we have elephant bones from Chirand. And there are domesticated animals like cattle, dog and sheep.
The states of Orissa and West Bengal, we have some Neolithic sites, and farther to the east we have some quite a lot of prehistoric finds from the northern Kachar Naga hills, that region in the borders of Assam and Meghalaya. But actually most of these evidence comes in the form of surface finds. So at many of these spots we do not have a clear stratigraphy. Yet at Orissa, for example, we have some sites like from Mayurbhanj we have Baidipur, and also from Kuar we have got some Neolithic evidence which is in Keonjhar, and there is another site in Angul which is Sankarganj. And these sites, at these sites of course we have some evidence of Neolithic stone tools. We have at some places we have evidence of prepared floor for huts, rammed floor for huts, and some amount of pottery which is actually either grey ware, and there is a variety which is a plain ware with a red slip and some incised decoration. But mostly in other areas the pottery is black and red ware. The dates actually range in around the second millennium BC.
Okay.
West Bengal actually gives us a very interesting scenario where we find that Neolithic layers are very quickly overlaid with Chalcolithic layers. In fact, at some of the sites we find that Neolithic and Chalcolithic overlap has taken place. One of the primary sites we all know is Pandurajar Dhibi in the Ajay Valley from Bardhaman district. Another interesting site is Bharatpur in the Ajay Valley itself. At both these sites we have some Neolithic assemblages. We have the black and red ware and the grey ware, a distinctive grey ware. And from Pandurajar Dhibi we also have evidence of rice. Yes, and animal bones, cattle is there. Assam Meghalaya is again a very difficult situation, because mostly good explorations and excavations have not taken place in these regions. The two excavated sites that we get from Kachar Hills, one is in Kachar Hills and that is Deojali heading, and the other is Sarutaru, which is on the border of Meghalaya. But we have some Neolithic assemblages, stone tool assemblages, etc. But it is not enough to kind of get a complete graph of the Neolithic from Eastern India.
And these are all surface finds.
Not only that, the dates whatever we have got from Assam actually come down to even the historical times. Evidence for prehistory in Eastern India is much later than elsewhere. That is one thing. Bihar is at least slightly earlier. That is ranging from the middle of the third millennium to the end of third millennium. But when we come farther east in Orissa and in West Bengal, of course it's mostly the middle of second millennium and the first millennium. In South Indian context, most of the Neolithic sites are found located in the two doabs. The Raichur Doab, which is formed between the Krishna and Tungabhadra, and the Shorapur Doab, located between the Krishna and the Bhima rivers. So these are the two most fertile regions for Neolithic sites. Most of the sites are located in the Andhra Karnataka zone, therefore. The ecological setting is actually very favorable for the Neolithic people. We find that the sites are mostly located at the foothills or the low hill region, not in the floodplains, and the vegetation here is also very scanty because the rainfall pattern is very scanty rainfall. So as a result of which we do not have much more than shrubs and bushes, which actually favored the Neolithic people with their meager stone tools. Most of the location is near perennial source of water on the other hand. K. Paddaya, who is a very noted archaeologist, as we all know, he actually excavated a Neolithic site in the Shorapur Doab, and his findings actually made him suggest that probably the nuclear zone of Neolithic lies in the regions of the Raichur Hills, Raichur Doab Hills, and the Shorapur region. And the early phase of Neolithic actually started out here. It was restricted in this zone, and later on from 1800 BCE it had shifted towards, it had spread out towards the west and the east and the south. We do not have any evidence, much evidence for Mesolithic in the nuclear zone of the South Indian Neolithic. It seems that there is only, it starts with the Neolithic settlements. So that is what had made Kartikeya Sharma and others also to comment like this, that there was all of a sudden development, evolution of the Neolithic in the context of South India. And about the dating, the period within which the Neolithic had flourished, it's quite early actually for South India. We have one of the earliest datings from Watgal, which is a habitation site. It comes around the 2900 BCE. There are two clear Neolithic phases here. The first phase is from 3rd millennium, the second phase is around 1800 BCE. And the third phase actually is very interesting, where like Eastern India, especially like West Bengal, we have a Neolithic Chalcolithic overlap phase. At certain spots we have come across huge heaps of accumulated ash mounds. These are formed into actually mound-like appearance, and these are formed of accumulation of burnt and vitrified cow dung. Analysis was carried out by the noted paleozoologist F.E. Zuner, and we are very certain that this is actually cattle dung. Now, layers of such dung were probably heaped up one after the other, and it has gone into a shape of that sort, but it seems that underneath there was cattle pen, because excavations at Utnur carried out by F.R. Olchin, the noted archaeologist, revealed that underneath we have, within a particular ground, we have hoof impressions, intact hoof impressions of cattle, just like at Mahagara. But at Mahagara we had a plain thing. I mean, it was not overlaid with accumulated ash mound. Now the stockade area is quite large, and in fact according to F.R. Olchin, there's a possibility that from about 1000 to 800 cattle might have been stockaded in the cattle pen at Utnur. Another interesting feature is that on the circumference of the ash mound we have post hole marks. Seems that we had a wooden fencing to it. Such ash mounds have also been found at many other sites like Utnur, I have already talked about. Then we have Kodekal, where K.A. Paddaya had undertaken certain excavations. Then we have Piklihal and Palaboy, from where also we have got similar evidence of ash mounds. So far as habitation sites are concerned, besides ash mound sites, we have a number of habitation sites, and such sites have also been found in the Tamil Nadu region, where we have T. Narsipur and Payampalli. Yeah, and good botanical evidence is available from these sites, where it seems that they were using ragi, millet, and horse gram, chickpea, the kind of other crops from the northern Neolithic zone. We get newer crops actually.
Can you tell us something about the rock art that we find in the southern Neolithic sites?
Yes, that is another very interesting feature. You see, from the twin site of Sanganakallu, Tekkalkota, Kupkal, Sanganakallu, there are nearby rock shelters where we have seen some kind of bruisings on rock, you know, etchings or bruisings. They are not painting as such, but like that, you know, in archaeologists' term we call it petroglyphs. And the motifs are basically some kind of animal motifs is the most common one, cattle being the most common one, and other animals are like tiger, deer and buffalo, besides which we have certain symbolic figures also, anthropomorphic figures also. So all of these, if you put them together, actually gives us a very rich picture of the South Indian Neolithic. And the date, as we know, ranges between the 3rd and the 2nd millennium BC. Another thing about the Neolithic at South Indian context, we find that there is an overlap phase, the next phase.
This is what we call a phase 3.
Phase 3. Yeah. In between the Neolithic assemblage in general, we have the sudden occurrence of some metal objects, copper and bronze, and even gold in some places. In India, each region had its own typical characteristics, and of course, in every zone there are certain areas in which clusters of Neolithic sites actually emerged. Maybe the geographical and climatic reasons had compelled the early man to settle in certain areas. Also the fact that they were using the raw material that was available in their own regions. So that had a great influence, a great impact on how they were going to interact with the nature around them. So that is also another thing, the climate, different climates. For example, the Kashmir people, the earliest Neolithic batch of people preferred to live in subterranean pits, because probably that gave them some insulation from the cold climate.
More comfort.
Yeah, but basically in other places you will find that so far as dwelling style is concerned, there is almost a common feature of wattle and daub houses. But the pottery, when you come to pottery, you have these regional features, which is very
Some of them are
quite characteristic in each region. Although I think the black and red was gradually emerging as one of the common wares
prominent
in
one.
most areas.
Even the grey ware, right?
Even the grey ware, yes. But stylistic differences were there, and the manufacturing differences were there. Cattle emerges as the most common animal. About their belief system, we also find peculiar type of burial systems. For example, at Burzahum, which is very specific. But at many other places, we find almost common features with their own typicalities. So it's a very colorful matrix of culture that we get.
That's true.
And the Neolithic culture is spread over the entire subcontinent.